Hey, welcome everyone. My name's Eloisa Ramos, and we are here to study A Course in Miracles. We're working on the text, and I am joined by my daughter, Sonia. Hi, Sonia.
Hi.
My friend Connie. Hi, Connie. And we are on chapter 9. Let me just go there. Chapter 9, which is the acceptance of the atonement. And we left off, let's see, we're starting section 3, the correction of error. Okay, paragraph 1. The alertness of the ego to the errors of other egos is not the kind of vigilance the Holy Spirit would have you maintain. Egos are critical in terms of the kind of quote unquote sense they stand for. They understand this kind of sense because it is sensible to them. To the Holy Spirit, it makes no sense at all. Okay. Okay. Oh, um, let's see. Okay. I think that is probably referring a little bit to the section before because we were talking about the idea of receiving, accepting, or getting, and the error involved in getting, which is a devaluation of what we have. And therefore, we're coming from a place of lack, not because there's really lack there, but because we're judging it as not being good enough, and that's what we do with ourselves. Okay. So here it says the alertness of the ego to the errors of other egos is not the kind of vigilance the Holy Spirit would maintain, because the Course says that we need to maintain vigilance, right? But it's vigilance for God. Mm. So in this case, the ego, and it's interesting that it uses the word alertness because, we have this alert mode that becomes sort of a survival thing. When we go on alert, we're really like hyper sensitive to any sign of possible threat. So the alertness of the ego here is to the errors of other egos. Okay, so, and I do notice that sometimes we get our perception like turned upside down and we become very focused only on negative stuff. So if you catch yourself really just focusing on the negative stuff, that's what this is talking about, is that there's something wrong. We're picking out what is wrong in everything. We're driving along the road and it's like, oh man, this road could really use maintenance. There's a lot of potholes here. you know, why isn't the city doing their job? That kind of stuff. So we're just noticing things that are wrong. Um, and so number 2, egos are critical in terms of the kind of quote unquote sense they stand for. Because because let's see. Because when we compare, okay, when we use perception to compare, okay, and in order to find something wrong, we have to compare, we have to judge. If I say, well, this road needs fixing, there's a lot of potholes, I have to compare it to what I remember when it was maybe first paved or something like that. Okay. And so and so the comparison always involves the judgment. And it's all made up in my mind. Um, and so it makes sense to my ego, okay, because it's using a reference point that it's in its own mind, okay, but to somebody else, maybe they just came from visiting another country, where where you know you're lucky to have any kind of paving on the road. So they're like, oh wow, this is a great road, you know. So their reference point for the judgment of what a good road is completely different. So so that's why it has the sense underlined, because it's a um subjective sense. Let's see. Okay, they understand this kind of sense because it is sensible to them. To the Holy Spirit, it makes no sense at all. Yes. So for the Holy Spirit, the reference point, you know, the course says we should not judge. And the reason for that is because we're using subjective reference points to make judgments. Holy Spirit does not use a subjective reference point. It is the link to knowledge, which is absolute truth. And therefore, that is its reference point. Um, and so anything other than an absolute reference point would make no sense at all to the Holy Spirit. So hopefully that made sense. Okay, paragraph 2.
To the ego, it is kind and right and good to point out errors and correct them. This makes perfect sense to the ego, which is unaware of what errors are and what correction is. Errors are of the ego, and correction of errors lies in the relinquishment of the ego. When you correct a brother, you are telling him that he is wrong. He may be making no sense at the time, and it is certain that, if he is speaking from the ego, he will not be making sense. But your task is still to tell him he is right. You do not tell him this verbally if he is speaking foolishly. He needs correction at another level, because his error is at another level. He is still right because he is the Son of God. His ego is always wrong, no matter what it says or does. So I have a question. So if you, oh, I guess I just answered my own question. I was gonna say if you point out like trying to point out errors in others, if maybe somebody didn't like complete a task correctly, like if you're at a job or something and you're trying to maybe train an employee or something, and you know they're not doing things correctly and you have to show them how to do it. um I don't, that's not pointing out an error in the sense that you're trying to, I think it depends on the purpose, right? If you're trying to, in a loving way, to show them what is the quote unquote correct way versus pointing out an error and judging them for not doing it right. Is there a distinction there in terms of that? Because I know it's saying here that he may be making no sense at the time if the errors are of, well, all errors are of the ego. I guess I'll just let you explain. I'm a little confused.
Yeah, so I mean the work environment is a little different because in there, you know, the job has specific requirements, right? So if you have to send out, if you're working shipping department and you have to send out, you know, something, you know, by one of the carriers, okay, they have specific requirements. You have to put the label here and you have to, you know, put the address, the correct address or whatever. They, you know, they may have specific instructions you have to follow for them to be taking your packages. Okay. So so this is referring more to um the idea of, see, because it uses the word good. So to the ego, it is kind and right and good to point out errors. So we tend to lump, well, the ego lumps error with good and bad and kind or unkind. Okay. And so when it lumps them together like that, it's going to say, well, no, you have to do this right, because if you don't, it's going to be bad for you or bad for me, or it's going to be bad for somebody else. So there's going to be blame in terms of, if you let's see. Okay, if are cooking something and you don't do it right, you're going to ruin the food, okay? And that's bad because, I pay for the groceries and you just threw my money away or something like that. Okay, so there's a sense of that, yeah, that something bad's going to happen if you don't do it right. Okay, that there's a cost, that there's a price or a cost involved with error, and so it's right for me to point out your errors because I am saving you and saving myself. Okay, something, money, time, whatever, effort. You don't have to redo it, that kind of thing. Um, okay, and that makes sense to the ego. uh, because it looks at errors in terms of doing. Okay. It doesn't look at errors in terms of thinking or in terms of what we believe and how we are perceiving things, because the ego itself is an error. And the last thing it wants to do is bring attention to itself. So it has to point the finger to doing. And if you look at the idea of sin, for example, it's all about doing or not doing, so that the attention gets focused on the behavior, um, as right or wrong, and that makes you right or wrong. That makes you a sinner. So it gives the level of doing, it gives causality, and it also says that basically that's what you are. What you do is what you are, which is not true. So I mean, those are the errors. Errors are of the ego because it's a misperception of what we think we are when we identify with what we do, and then we identify with whether we do it right or wrong, as an error. So that's so so number 4, it says when you correct a brother, you are telling him that he is wrong. Okay. See, you're making it personal. So we're saying you are wrong, not what you did was incorrect. And let me show you how to do it correctly. Okay. Um, and that's why egos are personal, because they they're a self. And we make an ego for ourselves and we make egos for other selves. And that's what we're focusing on, ego to ego. Okay, so what it's saying here is you want to, um, your task is still to tell him he is right. Okay, so even when he does something incorrectly, that does not make him wrong. He is still right because there's nothing wrong with what God creates as our true self. Even when we make errors in what we do in our job or whatever. Um, so 10, his ego is always wrong, no matter what it says or does. But but he, our brother, is always right because he is a son of God. Okay. Okay, number 3.
If you point out the errors of your brother's ego, you must be seen through yours, because the Holy Spirit does not perceive his errors. This must be true since there is no communication between the ego and the Holy Spirit. The ego makes no sense, and the Holy Spirit does not attempt to understand anything that arises from it. Since he does not understand it, he does not judge it, knowing that nothing the ego makes means anything.
Okay, do you want to say anything, Connie, with that? No, no. Well, it just reminded me of today's lesson, right? Right? Everything, let's see, everything.
I have given everything I see in this room all the meaning that it has for me.
Yeah, exactly. So, yes. So all the meaning that the ego gives to anything is nonsense. Okay. And and therefore, why try to understand that meaning? That's the Holy Spirit. Okay. Um, so to point out the errors of your brother's ego is to say, well, the meaning that you gave to this is wrong. Okay. and and there's a correct meaning from my point of view. Okay. But it's still just a point of view. So it's my point of view is still individual coming from an ego, and therefore it's still subjective. So therefore there's really no, what is correct is it's really not is subjective. Okay. And so yes. And so if you point out the errors of your brother's egos, you must be seeing through yours. So the only way that we can judge others as doing something wrong or as being wrong is if we're looking through the eyes of our ego, because that's what the ego looks for. Um, okay. And since the ego and the Holy Spirit do not communicate, it means that we're not in our right mind. We're identified with our ego, which is our wrong mind. Um, so, and I know that a lot of times when things don't make sense, we try really hard to make sense out of them because we're not comfortable, with when things don't make sense. And we're like, well, okay, there's something wrong. We got to figure out what's wrong and fix it. And the ego is saying, no, you don't need to bother doing that. Okay. Don't even judge it. Just, don't, you don't need to give any mind to that. Because what the ego comes up with doesn't really mean anything. It's subjective. Okay. Number 4. When you react at all to errors, you are not listening to the Holy Spirit. He has merely disregarded them. And if you attend to them, you are not hearing him. If you do not hear him, you are listening to your ego and making as little sense as the brother whose errors you perceive. This cannot be correction, yet it is more than merely a lack of correction for him. It is the giving up of correction in yourself. Um, yes. So if we are identified with our ego, we're in our wrong mind. And if we keep focusing on the errors, we stay stuck in there because we're not listening to the Holy Spirit, because it blocks out it blocks out the voice of the Holy Spirit because we're so focused on what's wrong with the world, what's wrong with with our brothers and sisters, or with my husband, or whatever. And let's see. and so we think that that's correction, but the correction that the Course talks about and the correction of the Holy Spirit is a change in mind. So it's a change in perception from the false perception of listening to the ego to going back and taking guidance from the Holy Spirit, going back to our right mind. And that's the correction. Okay, number 5.
Is it my turn?
Yes.
Wait, who's okay. When a brother behaves insanely, you can heal him only by perceiving the sanity in him. If you perceive his errors and accept them, you are accepting yours. If you want to give yours over to the Holy Spirit, you must do this with his. Unless this becomes the one way in which you handle all errors, you cannot understand how all errors are undone. How is this different from telling you that what you teach you learn? Your brother is as right as you are, and if you think he is wrong, you are condemning yourself. So really the only way in which we can handle our errors is just to give our own to the Holy Spirit
Mm-hmm.
and not perceive our brothers insanely. That's the gist of it.
Yeah, and that's basically forgiveness.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, it's basically forgiveness because perception is subject to error. Let me see. I just made an error this morning. For some reason, I thought it was Sunday and it's Monday. And so I missed an appointment. Um, okay, so that's an error. And 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 so I have to be able to, if I start focusing on that, and then if I start making judgments on it and I start beating myself up, then I would be behaving insanely here. And I would not be able to, I would stay stuck in the false mind. So in order to help ourselves, to help our brothers, um, we want to be able to go to forgiveness, to be able to recognize that, what we do in a world of perception does not have any effects on our true identity and our true self. So we haven't actually done anything real. um, and so that's why we give all those errors over to the Holy Spirit. Um, and we do them with our errors and we do them with our brother's errors, which is the same thing as choosing to forgive. Um, yeah. So let's see. How is this different from telling you that what you teach, you learn? So that's what through forgiveness, we're learning to not focus on errors because we're learning to recognize that they're misperceptions. They're based on not on knowledge, because when we're perceiving, we have forgotten knowledge. And so we're going to be subject to errors because perception depends on the body's senses, on our memory, and on a lot of things that are not in the control. We're supposed to go to a meeting and there's a traffic jam and we're late, or things like that. So So we want to be able to just accept the situation and just let it go. And that means there's no judgment there when we can do that. Okay. Number 6.
You cannot correct yourself. You cannot correct yourself. Is it possible then for you to correct another? Yet you can see him truly, because it is possible for you to see yourself truly. It is not up to you to change your brother, but merely to accept him as he is. His errors do not come from the truth that is in him, and only this truth is yours. His errors cannot change this, and can have no effect at all on the truth in you. To perceive errors in anyone and to react to them as if they were real is to make them real to you. You will not escape paying the price for this, not because you are being punished for it, but because you are following the wrong guide and will therefore lose your way.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So the you here is really emphasized. You cannot correct yourself. Okay. So the you that is seeing the error, okay, cannot correct the yourself because it's the you that is seeing the error. And if it could see otherwise, it would not be seeing the error. So that's the ego self. So the ego cannot correct itself. And therefore, how is it possible that the ego can then correct another ego? It can't. Okay. But we can see our brother truly, okay, because we have the Holy Spirit vision, which is what allows us to see see our brothers as innocent, as whole, as complete, as the same as we are. Because it is possible, yeah, to see yourself truly. So that would be true perception, to see yourself truly. It is not up to you to change your brother, okay, but merely to accept him as he is. So to accept him as he is means that to refrain from judging, because in the previous paragraph, the last line, your brother is as right as you are, and if you think he is wrong, you are condemning yourself. So the minute that we make him wrong for his error, there's going to be guilt in there. There's going to be condemnation in there. And so, and the belief that we can condemn someone, or that someone can be condemned, would be the belief that we can change from being innocent to being guilty. And that's what we do when we condemn a brother. We believe that that he was innocent before, and now we have made him guilty, which is not true. Number 4, it's not up to you to change your brother, but merely to accept him as he is. So a lot of times, like with children, we tend to make the behavior of the child as what they are, and that makes it kind of like a personality trait, which is not really what they are. But once the child accepts that, oh, that's what my mom or my dad say that I am, then they make that part of their personality, which is, oh, I'm a bad kid. You're smiling at that, Connie. Um, um, okay, so, but yes, so 5, his errors do not come from the truth that is in him, and only this truth is yours. So, yes, so errors come from misperceptions, um, from misunderstandings, from misinterpretations, and it's all perception. But the truth is knowledge, it's not perception. Um, and only that is what we truly are as the Son of God, children of God. So his errors cannot change this and can have no effect at all on the truth in you. Um, so that's sort of saying, don't reverse the causal level here. Don't start blaming someone for you being upset because they made you wait an hour for a sandwich. you know. So, because what they do, their errors can have no effect at all on the truth in you. So, whatever is reacting to that must not be the truth in you. It's our ego, which is false and not true, that's reacting. Yeah. So, to perceive errors in anyone and to react to them as if they were real is to make them real to you. And you had that example, Sonia, with someone was waiting for a sandwich for an hour and they got really angry and started yelling at the employees. Um, so you will not escape paying the price for this, not because you're being punished for it, but because you are following the wrong guide and therefore will lose your way. So yes, so to reverse the levels and to start reacting to the errors, because we're perceiving that it's hurtful to us or an inconvenience to us or whatever it is, that's to be identified with our ego. And a lot of times we will interpret that, God's punishing me. Why did this have to happen to me? Poor me. But it's not that it's punishment, is that we're following the wrong guide. And when we follow the wrong guide, we will get lost, basically in unhappiness, because our perception will be focused only on what's bad and wrong and negative. And there's no way to get to be happy when we're only perceiving negativity. Okay. Number 7. Is it my turn? Yeah. Your brother's errors are not of him any more than yours are of you. Accept his errors as real, and you have attacked yourself. If you would find your way and keep it, see only truth beside you, for you walk together. The Holy Spirit in you forgives all things in you and in your brothers. His errors are forgiven with yours. Atonement is no more separate than love. Atonement cannot be separate because it comes from love. Any attempt you make to correct a brother means that you believe correction by you is possible. And this can only be the arrogance of the ego. Correction is of God, who does not know of arrogance. Okay. Yeah, so a lot of time, we associate correction with, for example, authority figures in the world. So like teachers, right? Teacher corrects your homework. Okay. Parents correct your behavior. Um, let's see, policemen, they correct your, behavior with punishment or whatever. But um, but the correction here is not one that we apply to each other. It's the correction is of God. Okay. And the correction is not, let's see, we interpret it a lot of times as punishment. We think, oh, God is a punishing God. But the correction is really a loving, um, it's, you could say we were lost, and the correction is, oh, we have a guide now that's showing us how to find our way back. And that's a loving thing. That's not a bad thing. So um and and you know um since we're in the same place as our brother, we're not in a position to be the one correcting when we're lost too. When we're in our ego, we're in the same position that our brother is. So we're not in a position to offer any kind of correction because we're both following the ego. Um, and so that would just be an idea of inequality, and that's what we tend to see, like between teacher and a student. Oh, well, yeah, the teacher knows more than me, so the teacher can correct me. Oh, yeah, well, my parent knows more than me. And maybe when I get into my teenage years, I'm like, well, no, my parent doesn't know more than me. So, yeah, I'm not going to take correction from my parent. I know more than my parents now. So, it's not that kind of a correction. The Holy Spirit correction, the atonement is correction. And the atonement is the answer to the error of separation. And it merely puts us back, it turns us back around so that we come to a place of recognizing the truth, which, okay, the separation never happened. Okay, so in truth, there is no error. And let me see if I can explain it a different way. So when you're in first grade and they're teaching you addition and you use a pencil, okay, and when you make a mistake, the teacher says, okay, go ahead and correct the problem. Okay, the answer is wrong. Okay, so what you do is you take the eraser and you erase the wrong answer. So when you put the right answer, that's the only thing you see. Okay, because the wrong answer is not there anymore. It's erased. It's gone. That's really the correction of the Holy Spirit. It's an undoing of the error. Otherwise, you say, okay, that answer is wrong. And you put a line across the answer. And then you say, okay, write it out again with the correct answer. But you're holding on to the error. Okay, you didn't erase the wrong answer. You still have the problem there. And now you're doing rework. Okay. And the rework, now you're going to have to figure out the right answer. But the problem is that you're still holding this in memory because you haven't erased the wrong answer. And so that's not true forgiveness because you still remember, oh yeah, I made that error. I don't know if that helps, but it's an undoing. The correction of the Holy Spirit of God is an undoing of the error. It's not an opposite to being wrong. I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah. Because we tend to think in opposites. So we tend to think, okay, I'm driving and I didn't get to where I was supposed to go. So I must have made a wrong turn. So if I turn left here, I better go the opposite way and turn right here. Okay. So we tend to think that to correct the error, I have to go in the opposite direction. Okay. But if I'm not listening to the Holy Spirit, I'm not correcting the error. Okay, I might go to the right, but if I'm taking guidance from the ego, it's still going to be wrong. Did that make sense? Yeah, okay. All right. So number 8.
The Holy Spirit forgives everything because God created everything. Do not undertake his function, or you will forget yours. Accept only the function of healing in time, because that is what time is for. God gave you the function to create in eternity. You do not need to learn that, but you do need to learn to want it. For that, all learning was made. This is the Holy Spirit's use of an ability that you do not need, but that you made. Give it to him. You do not understand how to use it. He will teach you how to see yourself without condemnation by learning how to look on everything without it. Condemnation will then not be real to you, and all your errors will be forgiven. Yeah, I think 5 is really important. You do not need to learn that, but you do need to learn to want it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think again, it's about valuing, because as long as we value error, we're just going to keep condemning ourselves and just, I mean, if I don't want, if I don't want the function of healing, then what's the point? I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, and our only function for healing is to forgive, um, and that's the only function in time, because because in eternity our function is to create, but in time we we only miscreate until our mind is healed. If our mind is not healed, we are miscreating because the mind is sick, and it's identified with the ego, which is basically a detour into fear, and the fear is what miscreates. Um, and it maintains the belief in separation. So um, so the ego definitely wants to for us to not forgive errors, to hold on to errors, to hold on to the grievance instead. Um, and in this number 7, this is the Holy Spirit use of an ability that you do not need. Yes, so we taught ourselves to perceive error and to make judgments and to condemn. Um, and that's an ability that is really debilitating when we really look at it, and not anything that we need. In fact, I think the Course says we don't even need perception. So it just says, give it to him, um, because you do not understand how to use it. Um, so he will teach you how to see yourself without condemnation by learning how to look on everything without it. And that's holy vision. So we want to be able to, we need to, like what you were saying, Sonia, uh, let's see, you do not need to learn that, but you do need to learn to want it. So we want to learn to want to be our true self that creates in eternity as the Son of God. So it's that little willingness that the Holy Spirit needs to help us to release all these errors from our mind. Let's see. Yeah. And so the Holy Spirit forgives everything because God created everything. And the Holy Spirit knows that everything is good. There's nothing wrong with it. There's no error because what God creates is perfect. Um, and um, and therefore anything that would appear in appearance, in perception, to be an error and imperfect, Holy Spirit just forgives us because he knows that's not true. It's an illusion. And fundamentally, that's what's in the forgiveness definition that a course teaches that I don't think, very many religions teach, which is that we are forgiving our brother for what they did not do. We just believe that they did it, or we misinterpreted that they did it, or something like that. But it's all a misperception, a miscreation of our mind. So let's see. So yeah. So 11, condemnation will then not be real to you and all your errors will be forgiven. And so that's basically the end of guilt. To teach, the Holy Spirit, will teach you how to see yourself without condemnation by learning how to look at everything without it, which means that we don't, what's the word? That we recognize that there's no need to judge at all. There's no need to compare. There's no need to, we just accept. We're just in a place of receiving and accepting what is. And therefore um, we, we don't have to, there's nothing to forgive because everything, um, because we're not seeing anything wrong with it. And therefore we will then not see anything wrong with ourselves either. So, which means that we will be forgiven because we will recognize our innocence and the innocence of all our brothers. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, any questions with that? The correction of error? No? Yeah. Okay, let's see. So let's go ahead and stop here. So thank you for joining us, and until next time.